A phone buzzes in a dead girl's room. 10,000 followers wonder why their favorite influencer has gone silent. In the darkness of a São Paulo mansion, a prominent lawyer deletes his digital footprints, but he can't erase the blood on his hands. In the digital age, life and death play out in pixels and posts. Carolina Pascin Nicoletti's Instagram feed still exists, a digital memorial frozen in time. Her last photo shows her beaming at the camera, sunlight catching her hair as she poses next to a sleek new car in the dealership where she worked. The caption reads, "Another dream achieved. #blessed #new beginnings." The comments section overflows with hearts and congratulations from her 10,000 followers. No one knew it would be her final post. Scroll back through her feed and you'll find a carefully curated life. Professional modeling shots for local boutiques, candid moments with her beloved dog Loki, inspiring quotes about perseverance, and glimpses of a young woman chasing her dreams. But social media is a mirror that only reflects what we choose to show. Behind every perfectly filtered photo lurked shadows that Carolina kept carefully cropped out of frame. Born in the late 1990s in Itapeva, a small city in São Paulo state, Carolina, or Carol, as friends and family called her, grew up with the kind of infectious energy that drew people to her like moths to flame. Her childhood friends remember a girl who could light up a room with her laugh, who would spend hours nursing injured street animals back to health, and who dreamed of becoming a veterinarian long before she knew how to spell the word. Carol had this way about her, recalls Maria Santos, her best friend since elementary school. She could make friends with anyone, from the shyest kid in class to the grumpiest old man at the corner store. There was just something genuine about her that people responded to. This natural charisma would later serve her well in her career as a car saleswoman, where she quickly became one of the dealership's top performers. But in those early years, it was simply part of who she was, a bright spirit who saw the best in everyone and everything. Her mother, Elaine Pascin, raised Carol alone. The identity of Carol's biological father remained unknown to the public, but this absence seemed to only strengthen the bond between mother and daughter. Elaine, a respected psychologist, worked hard to provide her daughter with opportunities she never had. Their relationship was more than just mother and daughter. They were best friends, confidants, and each other's biggest supporters. "We told each other everything," Elaine would later say, her voice breaking as she fought back tears. "Or at least, I thought we did. There were secrets she kept from me, terrible things she endured alone, trying to protect me. If only I had known sooner." But those secrets would come later. In her early teens, Carol was thriving. She excelled in school, particularly in biology and chemistry, subjects that would help her pursue her veterinary dreams. Her teachers noted not just her academic abilities but her emotional intelligence. She was often the one consoling classmates after breakups or mediating playground disputes. At 15, Carol's natural beauty and outgoing personality caught the attention of a local boutique owner, who asked if she'd be interested in modeling for their social media campaigns. What started as a fun weekend activity soon blossomed into a side career. Her Instagram following grew steadily as she balanced modeling gigs with her studies and later, her work at the car dealership. She was never just about the glamour, says Roberto Alves, her manager at the dealership. Carol could have easily pursued modeling full-time, but she was practical. She knew she needed a stable income to put herself through veterinary school. And she was amazing with customers. They trusted her instantly. By her early 20s, Carol had built what looked like a perfect life. Her Instagram feed showcased a successful young woman juggling multiple careers while pursuing her education. She posted daily motivational messages encouraging her followers to chase their dreams, often sharing glimpses of her study sessions and celebrations of small victories. But social media can be deceiving. Between the carefully composed photos and inspirational captions, there were gaps, unexplained absences, cryptic posts about staying strong, and occasional dark circles under her eyes that even the best filters couldn't completely hide. Those who knew her well noticed subtle changes. Her once frequent visits home became sporadic. Her characteristic openness gave way to guarded responses about her personal life. When she did visit her mother, she would obsessively check her phone, jumping at unexpected notifications. Looking back, the signs were there, Maria admits. Sometimes during lunch, She'd see a particular car drive by and completely freeze mid-sentence. Or she'd get a text and her whole demeanor would change. But whenever I asked, she'd brush it off with a smile and change the subject. What few people knew was that Carol's life was not entirely her own. For over a decade, a shadow had loomed over her family, a presence that had slowly, insidiously worked its way into every aspect of their lives. His name was Eduardo de Freitas Santos, and to the outside world, he was a respected lawyer, a pillar of the community, and Elaine's long-term partner who had helped raise Carol since she was a young teen. But appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the monsters in our lives wear suits and carry briefcases. In Carol's last private Instagram message to Maria, sent just days before her death, she wrote, "I think I'm finally ready to tell the whole story. There's so much people don't know, so much I've been afraid to say. But I can't live in fear anymore. I need to be free." She never got the chance to tell that story. But the truth would eventually come out, though at a price far higher than anyone could have imagined. The same social media platforms that had showcased her seemingly perfect life would soon become digital crime scenes, holding clues to a tragedy that would shock Brazil and expose the darkest corners of human nature. As investigators would later discover, in the weeks leading up to her death, Carol had begun drafting a document on her phone. Its title was simple, The Truth. Its contents would never be fully revealed, as the phone was found shattered beyond repair. But the first line, recovered from cloud backup, read, "If anything happens to me, look closer at the man who calls himself my father." The stage was set for a tragedy that no one saw coming, except perhaps the man who had been planning it all along. Eduardo de Freitas Santos cultivated an image of respectability like others might tend a garden, with meticulous care and ruthless pruning of anything that might mar the perfect surface. In the legal circles of Pilar do Sul, his name carried weight. His office, housed in a restored colonial building in the heart of the business district, spoke of old money and established power. But like many carefully constructed facades, cracks would eventually appear, revealing the rot beneath. Born into a middle-class family in São Paulo, Eduardo had clawed his way up through sheer determination and calculated charm. Former classmates from his law school days at the University of São Paulo remember him as intensely ambitious, always positioning himself close to those with influence or wealth. Eduardo didn't just want to succeed, recalls a former colleague who asked to remain anonymous. He wanted to dominate. His early career showed promise. Eduardo specialized in property law, building a reputation for winning seemingly unwinnable cases. His clients praised his attention to detail and his ability to find leverage in any situation. What they didn't know was how he obtained some of his information, the methods that wouldn't come to light until years later. By his early 40s, Eduardo had established himself as one of the most successful lawyers in the region. His client list included wealthy landowners, politicians, and business executives. He served on charitable boards, donated to political campaigns, and was frequently quoted in local newspapers about legal matters. In photos from this period, he appears distinguished. Salt and pepper hair always perfectly groomed, expensive suits tailored to perfection, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He knew exactly how to present himself, says Detective Regina Alves, who would later investigate his crimes. Every public appearance was calculated. He didn't just play the part of a respected professional. He studied it, perfected it, like an actor preparing for the role of his life. It was at a charity gala in 2006 that Eduardo first met Elaine Pascin. She was there representing a mental health nonprofit where she volunteered, dressed simply but elegantly in a black dress that stood out among the flashier attendees. Their initial conversation lasted hours, ranging from psychology to philosophy to their shared love of classical music. Elaine, a single mother working hard to build her psychology practice while raising young Anna Carolina, was captivated by Eduardo's intelligence and apparent depth. He listened intently as she spoke about her work, her dreams for her daughter, her struggles as a single parent. He seemed to understand her in a way few others had. He made me feel seen, Elaine would later tell investigators, her voice hollow with the weight of hindsight. I thought I had found someone who truly understood me, who could be a partner in every sense of the word. I didn't realize then that understanding people was his weapon. Their courtship was swift but appeared thoughtful. Eduardo integrated himself into their lives with careful precision. He attended Carol's school events, helped Elaine with her practice's paperwork, and seemed to anticipate their needs before they arose. Within 6 months, he had moved into their home. Within a year, he had become an indispensable part of their family unit. To the outside world, they appeared to be the perfect modern family. Eduardo played the role of devoted partner and caring father figure with convincing skill. He posted family photos on social media, attended parent-teacher conferences, and even coached Carol's school debate team. But beneath this carefully constructed image, the first signs of his true nature were beginning to emerge. It started subtly. Eduardo began offering suggestions about Elaine's practice, which clients she should take, which she should refer elsewhere. He expressed concerns about Carol's friends, gradually limiting her social circle to those he approved of. His recommendations carried the weight of authority, backed by logical-sounding arguments that made resistance feel unreasonable. He had a way of making his control seem like care, Elaine would later explain. If I questioned his decisions, he would make me feel like I was being ungrateful or paranoid. He was so good at turning things around that I would end up apologizing to him. The transformation of their home life was gradual but profound. Eduardo insisted on installing a security system that included cameras in every room. For their protection, he claimed. He upgraded their phones with special family tracking apps. Every aspect of their lives became subject to his oversight, all under the guise of love and protection. Carol, then entering her teenage years, was particularly affected by these changes. Her once outgoing personality began to show signs of strain. Friends noticed she became more reserved, especially when Eduardo was nearby. She developed a habit of checking her phone constantly, responding to his messages with unusual urgency. There were rules about everything, recalls Maria, Carol's childhood friend. What she could wear, who she could see, how long she could stay out. If she was even a minute late responding to his messages, there would be consequences, subtle ones, but they were there. Eduardo's influence over the family grew incrementally but inexorably. He began managing their finances, convincing Elaine to add his name to their accounts for practical reasons. He suggested Carol transfer to a new school where he had connections. Each change was presented as being for their benefit, each new restriction framed as protection. But it was his behavior toward his young secretary that would provide the first public glimpse of Eduardo's true nature. In 2017, a 17-year-old girl named Julia Santos, no relation, began working at his law office as part of a student work program. Within months, disturbing allegations emerged. Julia reported that Eduardo had created an increasingly uncomfortable work environment, progressing from inappropriate comments to more serious violations. The final straw came when she discovered videos of herself in compromising situations had been shared online. Videos she had no memory of, taken in Eduardo's office. The investigation revealed a pattern of predatory behavior. Eduardo had allegedly drugged Julia's coffee, recorded his actions, and used the videos as leverage to ensure her silence. When the case went to court, his carefully constructed facade began to crack. During the trial, we saw glimpses of the real Eduardo, says prosecutor Marco Silva. When challenged or cornered, his mask would slip. The charm would vanish, replaced by something cold and calculating. Eduardo was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison, though the sentence was later reduced to 6 years and 2 months. He served only 11 months before being released on legal technicalities, a development that would later be scrutinized when the full scope of his crimes came to light. The secretary incident should have been the end of Eduardo's influence over Elaine and Carol's lives. Instead, it marked the beginning of an even darker chapter. During his brief time in prison, he had maintained his psychological hold over the family through a combination of threats and manipulation. Upon his release, he returned to their lives, his control now tinged with an edge of desperate possession. Looking back, says Detective Alves, the secretary case was like a preview of what was to come. All the elements were there, the abuse of power, the use of technology for control, the careful manipulation of evidence. We just didn't connect the dots in time. The man behind the mask was beginning to show his true face, but the full horror of his actions was still hidden in shadow. For Carol, who had lived with this shadow since her early teens. The worst was yet to come. The respected lawyer, the community leader, the supposed father figure, all were personas crafted to hide the predator beneath. As one chapter of Eduardo's crimes concluded, another was already unfolding. One that would ultimately lead to a young woman's death and expose a web of abuse that had been hiding in plain sight for over a decade. Power, when wielded by the wrong hands, tightens like a noose, slowly, almost imperceptibly, until escape becomes nearly impossible. After Eduardo's release from prison, the facade of family normalcy he had cultivated began to crack, revealing glimpses of the predator beneath. His control over Ana Carolina and her mother evolved from subtle manipulation into something far more sinister. The changes came gradually at first. Eduardo insisted on upgrading their phones, a gesture that seemed generous but served a darker purpose. He cited rising crime rates and concerns for their safety, but these new devices became digital chains. Unknown to both women, each phone came pre-installed with sophisticated stalkerware, turning their everyday companions into surveillance devices. Every message, every photo, every location. He saw it all. Detective Regina Alves would later explain, examining the forensic evidence. These weren't amateur programs. Eduardo invested in professional-grade surveillance software, the kind typically used by private investigators or, in some cases, criminal organizations. The software gave Eduardo unprecedented access to Ana Carolina's life. He could track her real-time location, monitor her conversations, and even activate her phone's microphone remotely. Her digital world became his surveillance playground, and she never knew she was being watched. But technology was just one thread in Eduardo's web. He began showing up unexpectedly at Ana Carolina's workplace, her university, even her favorite cafe. These chance encounters were carefully orchestrated, designed to remind her that she could never truly escape his watchful eye. He would send me messages about conversations I'd had in private. Ana Carolina confided to her best friend Maria in a recovered text message. He knew things he couldn't possibly know unless he was always watching. The surveillance extended beyond the digital realm. Eduardo hired private investigators to follow Ana Carolina, collecting detailed reports about her daily routines, her friends, and any potential romantic interests. These dossiers became weapons in his psychological warfare, allowing him to anticipate and control her movements with frightening precision. At home, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Security cameras monitored every corner of the house, their red lights blinking like mechanical eyes in the darkness. Eduardo insisted these measures were for protection, but they served only to create a prison of perpetual observation. Ana Carolina's first attempt to break free came in early 2021. She had carefully saved money from her job at the car dealership, creating a secret bank account under a friend's name. One morning, she packed a small bag and slipped out before dawn, leaving only a brief note. "I need to breathe." She made it as far as Sorocaba, a city about 100 kilometers away. For 3 days, she stayed in a small hotel, paying cash and using a burner phone. For the first time in years, she felt the possibility of freedom. But Eduardo's digital net was too wide, his influence too pervasive. He traced her through a single careless Instagram login, the app's location services betraying her whereabouts. Within hours, he appeared at her hotel room door, his face a mask of concern for the public, his eyes burning with barely contained rage. "I was so worried about you," he said loudly in the hotel hallway, playing the part of the concerned father figure. But once inside the room, his true nature emerged. "You really thought you could leave," he whispered, his voice soft but threatening. "Everything you are, everything you have, it's because of me. You'll never be free of me." Defeated, Ana Carolina returned home. But this failed escape attempt sparked something in her, a determination that would grow stronger with each passing day. She began to document everything, keeping detailed records of Eduardo's behavior, his threats, his surveillance. She hid these notes in encrypted files, buried within innocent-looking folders on her laptop. Meanwhile, Elaine was beginning to notice disturbing patterns in her partner's behavior. The mother's psychological training, which had been suppressed by years of manipulation, slowly began to reassert itself. She started recognizing the signs of emotional abuse, the tactics of control, the subtle threats that permeated their daily lives. It was like waking up from a long nightmare, Elaine would later tell investigators. I began to see how he had isolated us, controlled us, turned our home into a monitored cage. But the most terrifying realization was still to come. Eduardo's grip on their digital lives extended to social media, where he waged a sophisticated campaign of manipulation. He created multiple fake profiles to monitor Anna Carolina's online activities, posing as potential clients, fellow students, even romantic interests. These digital personas allowed him to gather information and manipulate her social circle. When Anna Carolina posted photos from modeling jobs, Eduardo would use his fake accounts to leave subtle, undermining comments. He would question her professionalism, hint at inappropriate behavior, or suggest she owed her success to special arrangements. These comments, coming from seemingly unconnected sources, were designed to erode her confidence and professional reputation. But his most insidious use of social media came in the form of what investigators would later call digital blackmail. Eduardo began creating compromising photoshops of Anna Carolina, manipulating innocent images from her modeling portfolio into something more sinister. He would anonymously send these edited photos to her, threatening to release them publicly if she didn't comply with his demands. The psychological impact was devastating, Dr. Marta Santos, a forensic psychologist who later reviewed the case, explained. He created an environment where Anna Carolina felt constantly exposed, vulnerable, and powerless. Her social media presence, once a source of joy and professional opportunity, became another tool of her tormentor. The turning point came in late 2018, when Elaine made a horrifying discovery while using Eduardo's laptop to print some documents for her practice. In a hidden folder, she found a collection of photographs that shattered any remaining illusions about the man she had allowed into their lives. The photos dated back years, some taken when Anna Carolina was still a teenager. They revealed a pattern of exploitation that had begun almost immediately after Eduardo entered their lives. Some were taken through hidden cameras in Anna Carolina's bedroom and bathroom. Others were more direct evidence of abuse, documenting horrors that Elaine's mind initially refused to process. When I found those photos, Elaine later testified, her voice breaking, everything fell into place. All the times Carol had withdrawn from me, the unexplained anxiety, the changes in her personality, it all made terrible sense. Confronting her daughter with this discovery led to the most painful conversation of their lives. Anna Carolina, breaking down in her mother's arms, finally revealed the full extent of the abuse she had endured since age 14. The secrets she had kept, initially out of shame and fear, then later to protect her mother, came pouring out in a flood of long-suppressed trauma. But even this revelation didn't break Eduardo's hold over them immediately. His years of psychological manipulation, combined with his professional connections and the compromising material he had collected, made them hesitate to go to the authorities. He had spent years convincing them that no one would believe them, that their lives would be destroyed if they spoke out. He had created this perfect trap, Detective Alves would later observe. The very evidence of his crimes became a tool to silence his victims. The more horrific his actions, the more impossible speaking out seemed to become. The web Eduardo had woven was strong, its threads made of fear, shame, and technological control. But like all webs, it had weak points. As Anna Carolina and her mother began to share their secrets with each other, those threads began to strain. Their growing awareness and mutual support would eventually lead them to take decisive action, but not before Eduardo's obsession reached its deadly climax. The digital trails he left, the photos he took, the surveillance software he installed, all would eventually become evidence of his crimes. But in the immediate aftermath of their discovery, these digital breadcrumbs served mainly to illustrate the terrible truth. They were caught in the web of a predator who had spent years preparing for every contingency, every attempt at escape. The next phase of their nightmare was about to begin, and not even Eduardo's carefully constructed digital fortress could contain the consequences of what was to come. February 2021 dawned with promise as Anna Carolina watched the sun rise over Sorocaba from the window of her new apartment. The modest one-bedroom unit was nothing like the luxury she had known in Pilar do Sul, but to her, it felt like a palace. Freedom has a way of making even the simplest spaces feel precious. She had planned this escape meticulously, learning from her previous failed attempt. This time, she left no digital footprints. Her new phone was bought with cash, registered under a different name. She had slowly withdrawn small amounts of money over months to avoid suspicion, and her new lease was signed through a friend's relative who worked in real estate. It felt like I could finally breathe, she wrote in a journal entry found after her death. Every morning, I wake up and for a split second, I forget to be afraid. The car dealership where she found work welcomed her enthusiasm and natural talent for sales. Her colleagues knew nothing of her past. To them, she was simply Carol, the cheerful new hire with a knack for making customers feel at ease. She kept her social media presence minimal, posting only what was necessary for her work, always careful to avoid location tags or identifying backgrounds. In those first few weeks, Anna Carolina began building something she had never truly had before, an independent life. She enrolled in veterinary classes at the local university, paying her tuition with her savings and sales commissions. She made new friends, though she kept them at a careful distance, always conscious of the secrets she carried. Her small apartment slowly transformed into a home. She filled it with second-hand furniture, each piece chosen with care. A worn but comfortable sofa became her favorite reading spot. A rescued street cat named Luna made herself at home on the windowsill. For the first time in years, Anna Carolina had a space that was truly her own. But Eduardo's shadow loomed even in her absence. Like a spider sensing disturbance in its web, he had begun searching for her almost immediately after her disappearance. His methods were as methodical as they were relentless. He started with her known associates, showing up at their homes and workplaces under the guise of a concerned father figure. "I'm worried about her safety," he would say, his voice perfectly modulated to convey paternal concern. "Please, if you know anything." When this approach yielded nothing, he escalated. Using his connections in the legal community, he began monitoring property records and rental agreements in surrounding cities. He hired private investigators to check university enrollments, knowing her dream of becoming a veterinarian might lead her to register for classes. The first crack in Anna Carolina's carefully constructed new life appeared in March. A customer at the dealership asked to test drive a luxury car, nothing unusual in her line of work. But when she met him in the showroom, her blood ran cold. Eduardo stood there, wearing the same benevolent smile that had masked his true nature for so many years. Anna Carolina fled to the dealership's back office, her heart pounding. By the time security responded to her panic, Eduardo had already left, but his message was clear: he could find her anywhere. The incident pushed her to take legal action. With trembling hands but steely resolve, she filed for a restraining order. The court proceedings forced her to detail years of abuse, each statement feeling like ripping open old wounds. "The hardest part wasn't telling my story," she later confided to a close friend. "It was watching him sit there, looking so respectable in his expensive suit, while I described the monster behind his mask." Despite Eduardo's attempts to discredit her, bringing up her modeling work, suggesting she was unstable, implying she was ungrateful for all he had provided, the judge granted the order. Eduardo was legally prohibited from coming within 100 meters of Anna Carolina or attempting to contact her. The restraining order felt like a victory, but paper barriers mean little to obsession. Eduardo found new ways to maintain his presence in her life. Anonymous flower deliveries arrived at her workplace, roses, her favorite, just as he used to buy. Customers would come in asking specifically for her, using phrases and mannerisms that echoed Eduardo's. Each incident was carefully orchestrated to fall just short of violating the restraining order's technical requirements. The psychological toll began to show. Anna Carolina installed additional locks on her doors and security cameras in her hallway. She varied her routes to work and school, never taking the same path twice. Luna, her cat, became her early warning system. The animal seemed to sense her anxiety and would grow restless whenever someone lingered too long outside their door. It was like trying to live normally while knowing a predator was constantly circling, her therapist would later recall from their sessions. She was healing, but she could never fully relax. Then came what seemed like a breakthrough. In early June, Eduardo appeared to withdraw. The mysterious deliveries stopped. The suspicious customers ceased. For weeks, then months, there was no sign of him. Anna Carolina dared to hope that perhaps he had finally accepted her independence. She began to let her guard down, just slightly. She joined a study group for her veterinary classes. She accepted invitations to after-work gatherings with colleagues. She even started dating again, cautiously, carefully, but with growing confidence that she could have a normal life. "I think he's finally giving up," she texted her mother in October. "Maybe he's found someone else to obsess over. Maybe I'm finally free." Elaine's response was cautious. "Be careful, sweetheart. Men like him don't just let go." Those words would prove prophetic. What appeared to be Eduardo's surrender was merely a tactical retreat. Like a hunter studying his prey, he was watching, waiting, planning. The period of calm was deliberate, designed to lower Anna Carolina's defenses. In her final week of life, Anna Carolina felt hopeful enough to post a new photo on Instagram, her first personal post in months. It showed her smiling broadly next to a sold sign on a luxury car, celebrating her biggest sale yet. The caption read, "New chapter, new beginnings. Finally feeling like myself again." Eduardo, watching from one of his many fake accounts, saw something different in that smile, in that declaration of independence. To him, it wasn't a new beginning. It was an ending he refused to accept. The calm before the storm was about to break, and Anna Carolina's newfound peace would prove as fragile as the morning frost under a rising sun. November in Sorocaba brought unexpected cold, a chill that seemed to seep into bones and spirits alike. For Anna Carolina, the autumn of 2021 had settled into an uneasy quiet. Eduardo's apparent withdrawal continued, and life had taken on a semblance of normalcy that felt both precious and precarious. Her daily routine had become almost ordinary: morning shifts at the dealership, evening classes at the university, quiet nights studying with Luna curled at her feet. She kept her guard up but allowed herself small freedoms: a coffee with classmates, a weekend shopping trip, moments of ordinary life that had once seemed impossible. On November 12th, she called her mother. Their conversation was light, touching on work, studies, and plans for the upcoming holidays. Neither woman mentioned Eduardo, as if speaking his name might summon him back into their lives. The call ended with "I love you," words that would haunt Elaine in the days to come. The next morning, Bruno Glauser, Anna Carolina's boyfriend of 2 months, arrived at her apartment for their planned breakfast date. They had tickets for an afternoon movie, a simple pleasure that represented everything normal and hopeful in her new life. When his knocks went unanswered, he assumed she was sleeping late after a long week. After 30 minutes of unanswered calls and messages, concern began to gnaw at him. Anna Carolina was never late, never unreachable, habits born from years of necessary vigilance. Bruno used the spare key she had given him just days before, a symbol of growing trust and intimacy. The scene that greeted him would forever alter his life. Anna Carolina lay in her bed, seemingly peaceful if not for the small, dark hole in her forehead and the blood that had soaked into her pillow. Luna, her faithful cat, sat vigil beside her, letting out mournful cries that echoed through the silent apartment. Bruno's frantic 911 call brought the first responders within minutes. Detective Mariana Torres of Sorocaba's Homicide Division arrived shortly after, immediately noting the precision of the crime scene. No signs of forced entry. No weapon found. The apartment was ransacked, but with methodical purpose. Her laptop, phone, and external hard drives were missing. This wasn't a random act of violence, Torres would later testify. Everything about the scene spoke of planning, of intimate knowledge of the victim's habits. The killer knew exactly when and how to strike. The investigation began with surgical precision. Forensics teams combed the apartment, documenting every detail. The murder weapon had left a small caliber round lodged in Anna Carolina's skull, making immediate identification of the firearm impossible. The angle of entry suggested the killer had stood over her as she slept, a position requiring both physical access and the confidence that she wouldn't wake. Security cameras in the building's hallway had been disabled hours before the murder. The building's electronic entry system showed no unauthorized access, suggesting the killer either had a key or knew the security codes. Every piece of evidence pointed to someone who had planned meticulously. The level of preparation was extraordinary, noted forensics specialist Dr. Paulo Mendes. The perpetrator understood not just the physical layout, but the victim's routines, the building's security weaknesses, even the blind spots in the surveillance system. The digital investigation revealed an even more disturbing picture. Though Ana Carolina's devices were missing, cloud backups provided a glimpse into her final days. Her last Google search, how to permanently delete spyware. Her final email draft, never sent, addressed to her mother. I think I've found proof of everything. We can finally end this. Technical analysts discovered traces of sophisticated surveillance software on her building's Wi-Fi network. Someone had been monitoring her digital life until the very end. The programs used were expensive, professional-grade tools, the kind typically available only to law enforcement or licensed private investigators. When Detective Torres interviewed Elaine, the grieving mother's composed exterior cracked. Years of carefully guarded secrets spilled out. Eduardo's obsession, the hidden cameras, the systematic abuse that had begun when Ana Carolina was just 14. She provided investigators with a USB drive containing photos and documents her daughter had secretly shared with her. Evidence they had been too afraid to take to authorities while Eduardo's influence loomed over their lives. I thought keeping quiet would keep her safe, Elaine sobbed during her statement. But my silence only protected him. Now my baby is gone, and I have to live with that knowledge for the rest of my life. The evidence painted a damning picture. Eduardo's carefully maintained alibi for the night of the murder showed its first crack when security footage placed his car near Sorocaba hours before Ana Carolina's death. Cell tower data contradicted his claim of being home in Pilar do Sul. A search of his office revealed receipts for surveillance equipment and burner phones. But Eduardo had vanished. His house stood empty, his office closed for renovation. Bank records showed methodical withdrawals in the weeks leading up to the murder. He had been preparing for this moment, ready to disappear as thoroughly as he had once surveilled others. The manhunt began immediately. Eduardo's photo appeared on news broadcasts across Brazil. Border alerts were issued. His assets were frozen. But he had spent years studying how to watch others while remaining unseen himself. He seemed to have vanished into the digital shadows he knew so well. Investigators discovered properties registered under shell companies, safe houses scattered across São Paulo state. Each raid turned up evidence of his obsession. Photos of Ana Carolina, surveillance logs, detailed notes about her daily routines. But no sign of Eduardo himself. He's playing the same game he always has, Detective Torres observed. Watching, hiding, controlling what we see. But this time, we know what to look for. This time, we know who he really is. The digital breadcrumbs he had used to track Ana Carolina became the tool for hunting him. Every credit card transaction, every cell phone ping, every security camera feed could bring investigators closer. The hunter had become the hunted, but the question remained. Would justice come too late for Ana Carolina? As November turned to December, then to January, Eduardo remained a ghost. But like all predators, he would eventually make a mistake. The same obsessive nature that had driven him to murder would ultimately lead investigators to his door. But not before he claimed one final victim, proving that monsters don't simply vanish, they just find new hunting grounds. January 2nd, 2024, dawned like any other day in Praia Grande, a coastal city in São Paulo state. Tourists strolled along the beach, children played in the surf, and in a modest house 3 blocks from the ocean, a fugitive's luck finally ran out. The raid came at dawn. Police tactical units surrounded the property silently, their movements choreographed through months of surveillance. When they breached the door, they found Eduardo de Freitas Santos sitting calmly at his kitchen table, as if he had been expecting them. The man who had spent years watching others had finally been watched himself. He didn't resist, reported Officer Paulo Silveira, who led the operation. He just looked up from his coffee and said, "I suppose it had to end sometime." The casual nature of his surrender stood in stark contrast to the brutality of his crimes. In Eduardo's hideout, investigators found what Detective Torres would later describe as a shrine to obsession. One room was dedicated entirely to surveillance equipment. Another held meticulously organized files, years of stalking data not just on Anna Carolina, but on other potential victims he had been watching. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. A week before his capture, Eduardo's son had come forward with allegations that would add another horrific chapter to his father's story. His 2-year-old daughter, Eduardo's granddaughter, had shown disturbing behavioral changes after spending time alone with her grandfather. The details that emerged were heartbreaking. Eduardo had insisted on babysitting the child, using his relationship as grandfather to gain access to a new victim. The toddler's parents, though aware of his troubled history, had been manipulated by his seemingly genuine desire to maintain family connections. He convinced us he had changed, his son would later testify, voice-breaking. We wanted to believe in redemption, in second chances. That decision will haunt us forever. Medical examinations confirmed their worst fears. The child had been abused during what should have been innocent family visits. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community. Eduardo's carefully constructed facade of respectability crumbled completely. Former colleagues, clients, and acquaintances came forward with stories of manipulation and inappropriate behavior that had been dismissed or overlooked for years. The impact rippled through Brazil's legal community. Law firms began implementing stricter background checks and monitoring systems. Universities revised their policies on student safety and staff-student interactions. The case became a watershed moment in discussions about power, abuse, and the ways predators could hide behind professional credentials. In Pilar do Sul, where the nightmare began, Elaine Passin channeled her grief into action. She established the Anna Carolina Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping young women recognize and escape abusive relationships. The foundation focused particularly on digital abuse and surveillance, training victims to recognize the technological tools of control. Anna dreamed of healing animals, Elaine explained at the foundation's launch. Now, through her story, she's helping heal people. The foundation worked with technology experts to develop resources for identifying and removing stalkerware, turning Eduardo's weapons of control into tools for liberation. Elaine's work extended beyond the foundation. She began speaking at schools and universities, sharing Anna Carolina's story to help others recognize the warning signs she had missed. Her background in psychology, combined with her personal experience, made her a powerful advocate for change. The legal proceedings moved forward with deliberate precision. Eduardo faced multiple charges: first-degree murder, sexual abuse of a minor, stalking, and invasion of privacy. The evidence was overwhelming. The surveillance equipment from his hideout matched the digital fingerprints found in Anna Carolina's apartment. DNA evidence tied him conclusively to both crime scenes. In December 2023, while still a fugitive, he was convicted in absentia for the stalking and home invasion charges related to Anna Carolina, receiving a sentence of 2 years and 7 days. After his capture, prosecutors began building the murder case, determined to ensure he would never walk free again. The courtroom became a stage for final revelations. Eduardo maintained his composed demeanor, but his testimony revealed the depth of his pathology. He spoke of Anna Carolina as if she had been his possession, showing no remorse for his actions. His clinical descriptions of his surveillance methods chilled even veteran courthouse observers. As the legal process continued, Anna Carolina's memory lived on in unexpected ways. Her former workplace established a scholarship fund for veterinary students. The local animal shelter she had volunteered at named their recovery ward in her honor. Her Instagram account, preserved as a memorial, became a resource for domestic violence awareness. In her childhood home, Elaine maintained a simple memorial. Anna Carolina's paintings still hung on the walls. Her dog Loki still waited by the door as if expecting her return. But the space was no longer just a shrine to loss. It had become a symbol of transformation. Anna's story didn't end with her death, Elaine reflected in a recent interview. It continues in every person we help, every life we save, every predator we expose. She wanted to make the world better for animals. Now she's making it better for everyone. The case of Anna Carolina Pascin Nicoletti forced Brazil to confront uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and the ways technology could become a tool of terror. Her death exposed not just one man's crimes, but a system that had allowed him to operate unchecked for too long. As Eduardo awaited his final sentence, the changes sparked by Anna Carolina's story continued to ripple outward. New laws were proposed to strengthen protection against digital stalking. Police departments enhanced their training in technological crimes. Support networks for abuse survivors grew stronger. In the end, Anna Carolina achieved something profound in death that she had fought for in life. She broke the silence. Her story stripped away the respectable facades that protected predators, showing that monsters don't always lurk in shadows. Sometimes they hide behind law degrees, family ties, and positions of trust. Her legacy lives on in the women who find courage in her story, in the lives saved by her mother's advocacy, and in the changed systems that might prevent future tragedies. In death, as in life, Anna Carolina continued to light the way forward, turning her personal darkness into a beacon of hope for others.